Thank you Asus for sponsoring today's video. Asus ProArt, very interesting because I had this laptop in Taiwan with me. It's the laptop I used to edit photos, put some of the timeline together, and I really liked it. So I thought maybe bringing one to the office would be super interesting because I feel like this is like the MacBook Pro of Windows laptops, and that's why we have this 16-inch MacBook Pro right here with me, which is Jan's laptop. And so I'm pretty much looking to compare them for you guys today. It's gonna be an interesting one. In the past, I've had so many friends asking, what's the closest Windows laptop that can mimic the MacBook experience? And it's such a hard question to answer. There are so many Windows laptops out there that try to mimic the feel and performance of a MacBook. Razer is a clear example of that, and they do it so well that, well, they even have the Apple pricing experience. Yeah. Anyways, look, I brought this here because it's $2,000 cheaper than the current MacBook Pro Jan uses for work, and because of the price, looks, and how it performs similarly in most areas to his computer, I figured why not compare it to a MacBook Pro and potentially save you some money for those who don't mind making the switch. And I think the first thing that caught my attention was the design, more specifically the chassis itself. We know that Apple really does it best with their unibody designs that are milled from a single block of aluminum, and this actually feels the same but different. Asus made an aluminum CNC unibody chassis to mimic the rigidity that a laptop like the MacBook Pro provides, available in a nano black color, which was created through an anodizing process featuring this nano microporous structure. They simply implemented this to minimize reflections, which is a bit sort of like on the MacBook. This also helps with fingerprints, but to compare this with the MacBook Pro, I will say they are both just as resistant when it comes to prints on their anodized bodies. Both of these feel super nice all around, whether it's the top chassis or bottom chassis. I think these are very sturdy laptops, with the P16 having sharper edges. And in terms of weight, the MacBook roughly comes in at 2.17 kilograms and the P16 at 1.8 kilograms. They more or less have the same dimensions, with the thickness being 1.8 millimeters apart, but the weight is what really is noticeable at hand. As for the hinge, very similar in terms of resistance, different in looks with the P16 having this texture pattern on it, but they both feel like they need the same strength to open up. They also open single-handedly. Both feature a soft close mechanism and rotate all the way through the same angle. The only thing I found is that the P16 does wobble a tiny bit more compared to the MacBook, but the MacBook does have a bit more flex all around its chassis compared to the P16. It's like one laptop gives you one thing and the other gives you another. And it's exactly what I was hoping for the other day in terms of upgradability. Look, Windows laptops more or less always win when it comes to replacing certain components within a chassis, but they don't always do it best. Yes, I do appreciate that 90% of Windows laptops provide customers with the ability to easily open up a chassis. MacBooks, on the other hand, tend to have weird torque screws, and opening these lids isn't the easiest thing ever. Although with the P16, I did find myself using a T6 tip to open it up, and there were a few hitting screws under some rubber feet that you need to watch out for. However, no weird stickers over screws potentially voiding a warranty or anything like so. Now, certain Windows laptops do not support RAM upgrades, and the P16 is sadly one of them, which is a bit of a bummer. Don't get me wrong though, I do like that this delivers a couple of M.2 slots and provides the ability to upgrade the Wi-Fi card if needed, but having the ability to upgrade your RAM sticks is just such a solid plus with Windows laptops. As for the rest, we are talking about a 3-fan versus a 2-fan thermal setup, a 90 watt-hour versus a 99.6 watt-hour battery, a very different 6-speaker setup, and a whole different architecture, of course. I mean, just the thermal piping shows how different these systems are. What I do like about both laptops is that most of the heat is pushed towards the back, with some of the airflow pushed towards the bottom sides. The MacBook's back panel and bottom side exhaust is a bit sexier than the P16's, but the important thing is that none of these laptops shoot hot air directly from the sides. That being said, thermals on both are excellent. What really impressed me about the P16 is its ability to stay relatively quiet and cool compared to other Windows laptops. It's got 3 different fan modes you can cycle using FN+F, with performance mode yielding the most fan noise but the best performance. The only way for me to really make these fans kick in was by either exporting a big timeline on DaVinci or playing AAA games. The MacBook never really yields fan noises like so. When it comes to heat dissipation, the MacBook for the most part always wins against any Windows laptop really. The only thing I've found from experience is that when you really push these machines, they can get really hot to the touch. Look, to go over some temperatures, I pushed these by exporting our latest day in the life video on both laptops. I wanted to get both the CPU and GPU going so I could go over the temperatures. Exporting a massive complex 30-minute timeline with log footage in color grade, we saw peak temperatures of 44 degrees for the MacBook and 50 degrees for the P16 towards the top of the chassis. Towards the top of the keyboards, on the MacBook the hottest it got was like 42 degrees, and on the P16 the hottest it got was 42 degrees. CPU and GPU both saw peak temperatures of 88 degrees for the P16. As for the MacBook, I saw 88 degrees as well. And with either or, the cool thing is that both laptops have a tendency to concentrate most of their heat dissipation towards the top of the chassis. Their keyboards actually do a really good job at staying fairly cooled and not too hot to the touch, but during testing, I felt like the P16 did it better. I could also slightly feel the fans pushing air through the keys, which is quite nice. As for the keyboard itself, one word, lovely. And I like it more than the MacBook. I've always said it, I love MacBook keyboards, but they aren't necessarily the best keyboards out there. There are other laptops that actually deliver better keystrokes, travel, key feel. I remember one of the keyboards that impressed me the most was the MSI Titan's keyboard, and lately the Lenovo Legion 7i. Those are laptops with really nice keyboards. The P16 and the MacBook are more like professional keyboards. These deliver firm keystrokes, low-key travel, 0.9mm versus 1.5mm for the Asus. Both sets of keys feel really nice. They are plenty bright, with Asus being slightly brighter, but look, I think a simple typing sound test can paint an overall picture for you. The only thing I will say is that the font and keys are quite bigger on the P16 compared to the MacBook, but both have a very simple and minimalist design, only delivering essential key functionalities when needed. As for the trackpad, this is trackpad galore for me. This is what I've been preaching on a Windows laptop since forever. This very much competes with the MacBook trackpad in terms of size. The clicks are of course very different, but this might just be the best trackpad I've tested on a Windows laptop for now. Till this day though, MacBooks have by far the best trackpads. The haptic illusion created by a vibration when you click on these is just amazing. If you want a really good trackpad, Apple does it best, but the P16 is really well done. The material is like this soft, rubbery, aluminum-like feel. It's not like the MacBook, which feels like full metal. On this, the clicks are very nice and smooth, and I do love the addition of the dial that works hand in hand with Adobe apps. It's a nice trackpad to enjoy overall. This sits right in the middle of the keyboard, which sits in between a set of speaker grills. Speakers that output a very nice sound for a Windows laptop. The mids are really clean, the bass is way more noticeable compared to other laptops, and peak volume is nice. These are very well tuned from what my ears can hear, but nothing beats MacBook speakers. MacBook speakers overall sound like you are literally carrying a mini studio with you. I absolutely love the system in here, and it blows my mind every single time I use these. Both of these laptops do have a 6-speaker setup, but the MacBook is louder, has more of a punch to it, and the bass is so much more present. Let me give you guys a sound test. hope the sound clip translates well because in person these genuinely sound really good. I think these might be the best Windows laptop speakers I've personally heard up to now. Now, if you don't want to use these, the laptop does offer Bluetooth 5.4 and a 3.5mm audio jack you can use. The audio jack sits on the left next to a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type A port, USB 4 at 40 gigabits per second, an HDMI 2.1 port, which is good to see, and its power input. Along that, on the right, we have another USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type A port paired with a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type C supporting DisplayPort and power delivery, as well as an SD card slot with great read and write speeds. Luckily, the SD card slot makes the card itself stick out less than the MacBook. Honestly, I would say the only advantage this laptop has over the MacBook in terms of ports is proper USB-A ports. I tend to miss those on a MacBook. I would love to see MacBook eventually, I don't know, giving out one Thunderbolt 4 port, but I will give it to them. I love the MagSafe charger. Way better than having a full plugged in cable, which can sometimes cause disasters.
You know what? Testing battery life like this is not a bad idea. At 11 a.m. we were at 100%, okay? And then at 12 p.m. I unplugged the laptop, 82%. And now it's currently 12:16, which makes the battery life, it's at 78%. Not bad. Keep in mind that this whole time, Chrome has been opened, some of the settings within Windows have been open, and Discord. Just keep receiving messages and notifications here and there. So I'm just gonna update you through the video on how battery life has been, and we can just, you know, form a conclusion from there.
Now with the MacBook, you can connect up to 4 displays. I don't really have 4 displays here, but you get the point. 3 displays up to 6K at 60 Hz over Thunderbolt, and 1 display up to 4K at 144 Hz over HDMI. And with the ProArt, up to 3 displays, with USB 4 supporting up to a single 8K 60 Hz display. When it comes to the screen, I think the biggest downside of the P16 is the refresh rate. It's interesting to see Asus use a 60 Hz panel in the P16. I think it could use a higher end refresh rate, like the MacBook Pro, which delivers up to 120 Hz. For a laptop that can very much game, I was expecting Asus to deliver a screen with 120 Hz. With that though, we do get a 4K OLED panel with a 16:10 aspect ratio and a 0.2 millisecond response time. It's got 100% sRGB, P3 at 100%, and Adobe RGB at 98%. Touch support and stylus support is also included, and being 3840 by 2400, it outputs 400 nits in SDR and 500 nits in HDR peak brightness. It really is a gorgeous screen, and having a 1,000,000:1 contrast ratio really makes the picture pop. Plus, the touchscreen of the ProArt P16 features Corning Gorilla Glass. On the other hand, when it comes to the MacBook, Apple have what they call their Liquid Retina XDR display, a 3456 by 2234 native resolution at 254 pixels per inch. It's brighter at 600 nits in SDR and 1000 nits sustained full screen with 1600 nits peak in HDR. Aside from ProMotion, the colors on this are great, and the contrast ratio is the same at 1,000,000:1. If I had to choose one display over the other in terms of colors, I mean, it's really hard to choose because they practically look alike. The P16 is Pantone validated and TUV Rainland certified, and it does have a bit of a different coating when it comes to reflection and glare on its panel, with the MacBook being slightly better. One aspect where the MacBook also and always excels at is battery life. Battery life on a MacBook is incredible, and that's all thanks to Apple's silicon. ARM chips are known to be power efficient, and ever since Apple introduced them within their laptops, it's been very hard for Windows laptops to catch up. Some laptops with Snapdragon chips do it well, and it's been getting a lot better, and others, I mean, they just plain suck at it. But this, the P16, I think it sits right about the middle.
Okay, second checkup. Here goes. Last time we checked on battery, it was about an hour and a few minutes ago. Now we're sitting at 33% and it's 120. So if I look at the chart right here, we went from 100% at 11 p.m. to 83% at 12 p.m. to 42% at 1 p.m. and now it's 120 and we are sitting at around 32% now. But here's the thing now. That big drop happened because, well, technically I'm running the laptop in full brightness, performance mode, and I had it connected to the monitor, and I was also playing Cyberpunk, and then I was using Lightroom, and that all happened for a good hour, I want to say. So it's not bad.
But I ran another battery test throughout the week, and what I decided to do was to run the screen at 50% brightness, allow for the Radeon 890M to be used, and I set performance to balance. With that, I was able to get 7 hours by doing lightweight tasks like answering emails, multiple tabs on Chrome, Spotify open with Discord, and so on.
I just wanted to do another sound test because the laptop sounds crazy while gaming. I didn't realize, but it sounds so good.
Grenade out. Online.
My shooting is horrible,
But like I showed you guys, as soon as you start using the RTX 4070 non-stop, those hours drop by like half. I can almost get 3 hours of use, especially if I'm running best performance and I'm editing a video, editing on Lightroom, playing Call of Duty. With Windows laptops, it's also important to know that it's impossible to run your laptop on full performance without having it plugged in the charger. The reason for this is because components like the CPU and GPU have the capability to draw more power than the battery can provide. Like, think about it, this CPU can go all the way to 70 watts and the RTX 4070 up to 105 watts, which is absolutely insane. That's why this comes with a 200 watt brick, which honestly is surprisingly pretty small for what this is. I'm comparing it to our Lenovo Legion 7i, of course.
not bad, eh? Like, it's pretty small compared to the Lenovo charger, which I really like because the Lenovo charger is massive. The laptop is also about to die, which literally confirms my 3-hour testing because it's currently 1:51. There you have it, guys, from 11 a.m. at 100% to almost at 2 p.m. to basically almost 0%. That being said, I should probably charge it.
That being said, when it comes to power delivery, the MacBook on the other hand always delivers the same output, whether it's plugged in or not. And if I'm working on a DaVinci project, working on Lightroom, using Photoshop or even Xcode, I get around 6 to 8 hours of use on these laptops without having the ability to game. Remember that. Web browsing and light tasks easily yield 10 hours plus, and those hours can also include web development from time to time. But it's important to understand, guys, that as much as these laptops try to be similar, they are completely different. An AMD with an RTX setup is so much more different than what the Apple Silicon architecture has to offer. First of all, this year has an AMD Ryzen AI 9HX 370 processor paired with an RTX 4070 with 8GB of VRAM and 64GB of RAM running at 7500 MHz. This is the most maxed out version of the ProArt you can get. On the other hand, Jan's MacBook has an M3 Max paired with 48GB of unified memory and 1TB of storage, the most maxed out MacBook Pro they offer without any add-ons. And their main difference on paper is how Apple Silicon allocates resources when it comes to RAM, all because the architecture allows it to access memory quicker, which is why a lot of the time the MacBook feels a bit sharper and snappier. However, if we take a look at the benchmarks, things can get actually very interesting, especially for the price. In Geekbench, although the MacBook scores higher in multi-core scores, they nearly are identical in single-core scores. Those numbers actually translate pretty accurately within Cinebench, with GPU numbers being fairly close between the MacBook and the Asus laptop. Running Time Spy and Port Royale, I was able to get a very decent GPU score for the RTX 4070. The really interesting thing I realized earlier on with this is that when unplugged, the gaming experience does feel a tad smoother compared to my Lenovo Legion 7i. Like, running Cyberpunk with high settings actually makes the game feel fairly smooth. And as expected with Windows laptops, if you want max output, you'll have to keep it plugged in. You can also connect this to a monitor and play something like Call of Duty. It runs just fine at max settings. That, as long as you are plugged in to power, of course. When it comes to gaming on a MacBook, honestly, I've always said it, but forget about it. If you want a laptop to game on, get a Windows laptop. But if you need a laptop to create content on, there is definitely a bit of a debate to be had. Editing a full DaVinci timeline with 4K clips graded in 422 shot in log straight from a Sony FX3 camera both offer a really good experience. Whether the P16 is plugged or not, the timeline is smooth, color grading is great, playing with clips is quick. The only differentiating factor would be render times. Render times on the MacBook are really quick, quicker than the P16, but remember, you're paying almost $2,000 more for this type of performance. Lightroom and Photoshop are very much identical in performance, so I wouldn't overthink my purchase over that. The other great thing about both of these laptops is their SSD speeds. Both laptops yield great read and write speeds. I think the only thing that would truly make me overthink my purchase would be customer support. Now, a while back with my 2017 MacBook Pro, I had such a good experience with Apple's customer support. I had an issue with my keyboard and they fully replaced it after having owned the laptop for a couple of years. It was actually free. Apple are a company that try to pride themselves on customer support. Now, it's not the best, but it's good when it wants to be good, and people like me have had great experiences with them. However, people have had their fair share of bad experiences. The only thing I do like for everyone is how accessible they are. Its dedicated brick and mortar store makes them uniquely accessible, and you can guarantee you'll speak to a real person in person. Also, Apple carries a unique offering, but if you don't have it, replacing Apple parts is insanely expensive. When it comes to Asus, Asus distributes only through online or retailers and it doesn't have its own stores. This often leads to a disconnect with customer service. I've seen several examples online where Asus has been inconsistent on responsiveness, returns, and replacements. I would love Asus to really keep working on making customer support better. They make such great products and I hope they upgrade their support to meet their product as soon as possible. One thing is for sure, if you are debating on which ecosystem you should go with, I can actually try to help you with that. I'm both a macOS and Windows user. I use macOS whenever I have time to code apps, especially iOS apps, and I use Windows mostly when I'm at the studio on my custom PC. When I'm on the go, it varies, either a MacBook or a Windows PC, depending on what current laptop I'm reviewing at the time. All I can say is that, to be honest, for the most part, ecosystem plays a role, but if you want things to work out of the box, a Mac is unbeatable and it's what I recommend. And if you need more flexibility for the most part, a Windows laptop is a go-to. In terms of ecosystem, do you have an iPhone, an Apple Watch? Do you like the AirPods? Do you care for FaceTime? Battery life is also very important. It's a very important factor. And if you really need full performance at all times, that also plays a role, which means the Mac is the go-to. Other than that, it really doesn't matter. You can make a Windows laptop behave very similar to a MacBook and vice versa. The only thing is that if you do like gaming, a MacBook is like no-go in my opinion. If you like coding, both laptops are just fine. You've got dual USL support if needed, although on this laptop, dual booting Ubuntu actually doesn't work. I tried it the other day and to be honest, after some research, it seems like it's a pain to get working and maintain. I don't recommend it. One thing I do recommend from experience is that if you are going to be doing some game dev stuff, I do suggest you use a Windows machine, just like I suggest MacBook for native iOS development. Don't forget, Windows laptops often have included software like my Asus and the ProArt Creator Hub. A lot of the times these allow for you to maintain your system in various different ways and tweak your laptop in a very specific manner. I do think the coolest thing about the ProArt models is the Asus dial that can be very much tweaked within the ProArt Hub software. There are a bunch of things you can actually do with this dial, but what I do admire is how easy it is to activate, use within your softwares, and deactivate. It's really, really clean. Anyways, look, these are like the top of the line within their models minus the upgrades for Apple, but the ProArt P16 starts at $2,500 Canadian and the MacBook Pro 16-inch starts at $3,300 Canadian. If you want my specs on the P16, it will cost you around $3,500 Canadian, and if you want Jan's spec on the MacBook Pro, the bill is quite hefty at $5,300 Canadian. Very, very expensive. That's the Apple pricing right there. That's why it's sort of hard not to recommend the P16 at 100% because you save almost $2,000 with the P16. And as you guys saw, you get very similar performance, quality, and looks. Plus, you can actually game on it. Look, I think these laptops are exceptional, and finally we're starting to see more and more laptops coming into the space that try and compete against what the MacBook Pro has to offer. For those who don't like MacBooks or don't like macOS, the P16 is a serious and great alternative. For the time I've had it, it's been able to perform great. I will leave a few links down below if you guys are interested. Remember, we constantly review other laptops. If you have something in mind, let me know. I will be sure to test and make a video about it. Anyhow, it's great making videos for you guys. I will leave you all with this. Take care and see you all soon.